Hi there. Today, Letitia and I will be having a conversation on our very last topic of the series of the boundaries journey, which is on emotional boundaries. But before I kick off things, then I'd just like to personally welcome Letitia to the conversation. Hi, Letitia.
Hi, Rachel. I'm very happy to be back here with you and have a great conversation about emotional boundaries.
Cool. Okay, then. So, emotional boundaries. Now, these are just as challenging as mental boundaries because, well, they are about the rules and the invisible lines of boundaries that we set to protect our inner world. Now, internal boundaries are about regulating the relationship that we have with ourselves. Learning to effectively manage negative thoughts and feelings is empowering because it helps us to actually follow through on the goals and the commitments that we have with ourselves. Now, when we talk about setting emotional boundaries, we are referring to the level of protection that you activate in respect of other people's emotions as well as your own emotions. Now, as I mentioned, it is difficult to set healthy boundaries because, well, it requires a lot of inner work. And by inner work, I am referring to healing the inner child to be specific. It's taking a, let's say, deeper dive into the core limiting beliefs, knowing and living your values, working with your triggers, and basically just learning and understanding in a way in which you relate to yourself and to others. So, when you really want to begin to strengthen your emotional boundaries, it requires raising your level of self awareness around what internal emotional boundaries are and what they mean for you. What you can expect and will begin to notice when you start having healthy emotional boundaries is they will help you to actually prevent um, giving unwanted advice, blaming others, or accepting blame from others. They will also help you to protect from the feelings of guilt for the negative feelings that someone else is having and their problems, or even over obsessing and taking other people's comments personally. So, what are your initial thoughts, Letitia, that you have on this subject?
Well, we can start by saying that the creation of emotional boundaries happens through the separation of our feelings from those of others. This is very difficult if it was reinforced in us as children that our parents' feelings were due to our behavior. Let's remember that personal boundaries and relationships with others begin to emerge with the first relationship of our lives, meaning our parents. There is no doubt that for a child, parents represent the foundation of their relational world. In their psychological developmental stage, they perceive that the parents' emotions are related to how they behave. So, for example, if the parent is angry, it is because they are mean. Or if the parent is happy, then they have done something good. So later in adulthood, they may still carry this kind of inner belief into relationships with other people and feel responsible for how others feels. An example would be when someone around them is angry, it points the finger at them directly or indirectly as to why they are angry, triggering them that guilt they felt as children, and then they try to repair the situation by trying to fix the anger. Or in the case of people pleasers, trying to behave in a certain way to avoid provoking that anger and making sure that the other person is always okay, even at the expense of how they feel on the inside.
Yeah, my recovering people pleaser part knows that behavior really well. So, for people maybe listening, I can imagine that it can be difficult to actually self-diagnose if they have weak boundaries or not. Um,
Mm.
but if you know what you're looking for, then there are those signs. For example, if you're somebody who tends to overreact to things, then this is a good indication that you have weak or that you lack these emotional boundaries. Or if you don't instinctively know where to draw the lines of emotional responsibility between yourself and another, it will also eventually have you feeling easily overwhelmed. Emotional overwhelm happens, right, because we carry the emotional burdens of others. And to be honest, it's not really our responsibility. So the quicker that we actually learn and accept that, then the better for all concerned, actually. And I'm sure, Letitia, you also have some signs that people can look out for to indicate that their emotional boundaries are on the weak side, right?
Yes, the typical case of weak boundaries is the inability to recognize that no one has the power to make us feel in a certain way, and we should not let that power be available to someone else. An example might be when we feel happy while the other person doesn't. And for fear of appearing lacking in empathy, we suppress our happiness. Or conversely, when someone minimize or decide how you should feel about the situation.
Mm.
So let's say that you had an issues with your boss, and then someone tells you that you are exaggerating with your feelings. Nobody has the right to tell you how you should feel. And this can happen both within a relationship or in any other relationship. In fact, whether it's a friendship or a romance, a business relationship or family, there are attitudes that should never be tolerated, as these are emotional abuses that too often go unnoticed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. For sure, that happens. Um, so something that was a personal challenge for me actually was, because I had weak emotional boundaries, was social anxiety. I would be anxious when out in public. So if I would enter a room, a meeting, for example, at work, I would be thinking that everyone in the room was noticing me. And worse, I would actually be thinking that I knew what they were thinking about me. And of course, that would be always fall on this negative, that they would have a negative judgment about me. And because of it, I was terribly like self-conscious.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people can identify to your situation, to social anxiety. It's quite common. And so, talking about weak boundaries or rigid boundaries, there are people who are boundaryless regarding their emotional landscape and are unable to contain what is inside them by being explosive or aggressive or overexposing their emotions. For those who are confronted with this type of behavior, they tend to respond based on how much they allow this type of attitudes, or if instead they have not tolerance for behaviors that they consider abusive. So, who are the people who allow this behavior to happen? Those are the most insecure people with low self-esteem and an underlying fear of being alone. And so those are the people who tend to be compliant, to please others, and to accept inappropriate behaviors as well.
Yeah. Again, absolutely. I know the truth to people to people pleasing is actually about seeking and craving the approval of others. And that the downside to that is that you end up attaching your self-worth to what you think others think about you. And that then leads to this fear of rejection that has been my personal experience anyway. It was something that has not so much now, but it did plague and it ruled my life for years. And when my fear of rejection was triggered, I unconsciously, because I wasn't actually aware of it at the time, was actually seeking out rejection from others. So expressing my true feelings was really challenging because of this fear of rejection. And in turn, I didn't truly let people in or really let them get close to me. And so my personal journey really has all been about building healthy emotional boundaries, which is why I'm quite passionate about this. It's about understanding, it was about understanding that my self-sabotaging behaviors and learning to make choices that would support behaviors that would no longer be about seeking rejection, but instead asking for what I wanted to receive. And of course, that really just boiled down to acceptance. But first, I really needed to become open to myself, let myself in, and to accept myself, because it's all rooted at the end of the day in my childhood wounding. So
Yeah, totally, totally. If from childhood a person's needs have been ignored or even mocked, it is clear that in adulthood a person will further tend to normalize certain abusive behavior, um, because they will live with the constant fear of not being accepted, of feeling inadequate or inferior to others, or rejection. And these are the people that in social relationships tend to normalize or justify the behavior of others with phrases like, oh, she has a difficult personality, or she is, or he is a peculiar person, or even this attitude is just like him or her. And this, because at that moment we have decided to overlook it and stay in the relationship without stirring things up too much. However, the end result is to feel stifled by your own feelings of injustice in allowing someone else to be able to express theirs while you don't do that. And so the question to do to yourself should be, what are you willing to tolerate in order to stay in that relationship?
mm,
So draw on your own boundary lines and see how many of the relationships you have entered respect that line. And conversely, those with rigid boundaries will not tolerate this explosiveness at all, and they will turn their backs. It may seem healthy on the one end, but it's also true that there is a lack of curiosity in trying to understand where that emotional outburst came from. So, on the spectrum of rigid emotional boundaries related to how to contain one's a person's emotion, there are people who have difficulty sharing their emotional landscape because they perceive it as a burden, and that their emotions are not as valuable as those of others. And people who don't share their emotion because of an internal rigidity due to a lack of connection to their own feelings. Unfortunately, we are raised to label our emotions into good and bad and banish the bad in every way. So, and by bad, I mean sadness, anger, shame, guilt, frustration, and whatever we label as bad.
absolutely. And I just want to jump in here, Letitia, and dispel this myth that emotional health has this, like, this idea that no one doesn't have any negative emotions. That we should always be striving for complete and utter happiness and bliss. It's really complete and utter nonsense, and it's unrealistic, and that is unhealthy way to be thinking. True emotional healthy attitude is allowing yourself to feel whatever you need to be feeling at that any particular moment, because being human is about being here to experience all the emotions that are available to us, because each of them have a purpose. They are
Mhm.
messengers to help us to navigate our lives, and the lessons that we need to learn is how not to become actually stuck and remain drowning in these more heavy emotions for long periods of time. That's what we're here to learn.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up this because here I will make a small digression that ties in, however, with the topic of emotional boundaries. The reason trauma occurs in our lives is when an external event arouses in us an emotion strong enough to be perceived as overwhelming by our nervous system. In reality, our nervous system is at that moment putting a limit to what it can absorb, without this meaning that it does not have the ability to do it so later, when the system is self-regulating, self-regulated. The problem arises when our brain records and associates that feeling of overwhelm with a particular emotion and puts the label of dangerous and unsafe, and therefore to be avoided at all costs. Basically, we spend most of our lives avoiding, suppressing, or even numbing our emotions. In doing so, as Brené Brown said, we allow ourselves to experience not only we don't allow ourselves to experience not only the emotions that we define as bad, but also the good ones.
Yeah, I love Brené Brown. She's great. Anyway, I think there is another point that I feel is a good to mention, and that is the need to know if you are actually emotionally attached or detached. For example, or an example, shall we say, of when an emotional attachment occurs is when you become too invested in another person's struggle, and especially if that struggle is something that you yourself have experienced, because well, then what happens is you may start to believe that you know what's best for that other person, and that's exactly what will draw you into and get you to become too emotionally involved, and then basically you start to take on this like or their pain, and you go to this kind of crusade that you want to help and save them, and when really what that person needs is compassion.
Right. And in this regard, it is important to make a distinction between empathy and compassion,
Yeah.
starting from the fact that empathy is a beautiful virtue that we all should have because it is the basis of what connects us with others and leads us to help others. Empathy is the ability to tune into the feelings of others. However, a virtue can become dysfunctional in its extreme application as it causes a situation of osmosis, lack of boundaries, and enmeshment in which we are no longer able to understand who feels what. In that case, we are not able to help anyone at all. Like I want to make the example of on the airplane when they tell you that in case of an emergency, you should wear your mask first and then help others. Because if you help others and you're not allowing yourself to be helped, well, guess what will happen? Yeah, compassion, on the other hand, is the use of empathy at a higher level. It is the ability to tune into someone's emotion, holding a space for that person without being enmeshed in it. So remaining an empathetic observer, capable, however, of seeing the situation from a neutral space.
Yeah,
Uh, is
definitely.
it clear?
Yeah,
The distinction?
absolutely. It's completely clear. I mean, compassion for me is really the key to healing. And let's face it, humanity needs some compassion right now from each and everybody. I personally have found it to be the golden doorway, as I like to put it, to radical self acceptance and to self love. And I'm so passionate about it. I have done basically a few videos on it on my YouTube channel on the subjects of self love, self acceptance, and self compassion. So if you're interested, jump on over and have a look. But anyway, I think it's I think people who are attracted to watching these videos will identify themselves as a caretaker in a caretaker role within their relationships, be that a romantic or friendship. So to come back on that attachment versus detachment, often if you identify yourself as being in this caretaker role, I don't mean as such, that you're a nurse or something. I just mean that you adopt this kind of that you feel that you need to take care of everybody. That you most likely tell yourself that because it's a family member or it's a close friend, that you can't detach from them. But I want to challenge that. And challenge these people on this, because I can assure you that when you just dig a little bit deeper, you will find that there is a deeper belief that is feeding that thought. And when you can uncover what is blocking you from being able to detach yourself, that will be a key element in your self growth journey. So, If you realize that you are too involved, it's time to act, time to identify what is that internal block.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. And a boundary line should be innate in each of us. It should arise spontaneously and the outline in tandem with and outlined in tandem with self-esteem and self-love, as you were talking before. Unfortunately, this boundary does not automatically arise for everyone, as some struggle to draw this line and have it respected.
Mm.
So just remember that discussion and friction can occur. It's normal. However, comparisons that starts with you always have or you never have are generalization meant to accuse and trigger guilt. And they certainly don't serve to find common ground. So analyze how a relationship makes you feel. Try to be vigilant about the relationship um, in order to figure out whether it's time to change the course of it or it's time to walk away. Moving away doesn't mean breaking up forever or declaring war on the other person, but simply take time for yourself and put a safe distance between you and the other person. Most importantly, learn to love your emotions. They are the vital flow within you, and this vital flow needs to be managed and not suppressed. Only then you will be able to create your own emotional container and protect it both in your external relationships and internally with yourself.
Absolutely, 100% with you on that message, Letitia. Um, Emotional boundaries are the foundation for living and owning our truth and to be authentic with ourselves. So, if you're looking to be authentic, you need to be in balance and you need to be at peace with your emotions. They need to be able to be flowing because they're here to teach us about ourselves and about others and just life in general. So, to love your emotions is to love yourself. That's how I'd like to end this video today. So, Letitia, this was a beautiful and insightful journey. And yeah, I'm really have enjoyed collaborating with you on this. And I'm looking forward to some further work that we will collaborate on together.
Yeah, yeah, I am really grateful for this collaboration, and yeah, it was a great journey with you. So thank you, and thank to everybody that was listening to our videos, and I see
As
you next
always,
time.
like, subscribe, and thank you very much for listening. Take care. Bye bye, Letitia.
Bye, Rachel.